It became a jet base for many years, but now it's closed. And then when we graduated there, by the way, Jimmy Stewart was our speaker at the graduation.
Huh.
And it was quite a thrill because he was a captain in the Air Force then. And it was, we'd never seen any stars before that, except a few when we were based in Santa Maria. And it was quite a thrill.
Can we get you to imitate him?
Jimmy Stewart, no, I couldn't do that.
Okay.
But he was pretty much on the level. He was pretty serious because we knew all the kids that were graduating. He wished us well. It was a thrill. And then from there we went to Florida to be the first bunch of fellows that were trained in night fighter tactics in the United States. A special group of us. I don't know why we were selected, but evidently we had a little more, we did have a lot more instrument training once we were selected, and a lot of night flying in advanced school, which the others didn't get that much. And we had twin engine training and a lot of instruments. And that's probably why we were selected and given them so much more training, because they knew we'd be flying at night. Then we went to Orlando, Florida first, and from Orlando they finally gave us an airfield out at Kissimmee that we had by ourselves, just a small group, completely dedicated to night fighting training. And we flew the old A-20 converted, they called it the P-70, with conversion for night flying, painted black, radar equipment, so-called cannons underneath. And, it changed the symmetrics of the plane quite a bit, and so they were a little tricky to fly. It was very easy to go in a flat spin if you made too tight a turn, and we lost a couple crews by them pulling up in too tight a turn, and once they got in a flat spin, they couldn't get out of it. Very difficult plane to get out of because your pilot was set ahead of the props, and it was almost very perilous to bail out. So we lost a couple of crews in the lakes there near Orlando. Never did find them. I think after the war they might have found them, but during that time they didn't. When we got the training down there, of course Iris came down. We were married before I went overseas, and we weren't sure what we should do, but we decided to get married. So we had a month of married life together. Basically, most of it in a hotel because we were waiting for planes to take us over, and they were sending so many people over that the priorities were down the road a little bit, and then eventually we got on. I think it was on about the 19th of July, something that we left to go overseas.
43.
And for 1943.
And the trip took you through where?
We first landed at Brazil, in Brazil.
Yep.
And then the hop was from Brazil over to Dakar, Africa. And from Dakar over the desert to Marrakesh, which we weren't acquainted with any of those names at all. Never been there. In Dakar, by the way, we did see a lot of, the French had a lot of boats, Navy, and the Americans caught them in the harbor and sank a lot of their warships there. So they didn't have a chance to decide which side of the conflict they're going to be on, so they lost their Navy almost completely in Dakar, and that was quite a sight to see. Then we went to Marrakesh, and that's where we ran across this poor little Italian general, Graziani, and they were taking him to America to be interrogated, and he was telling us about he was very friendly, and he could talk broken English pretty good. And he was telling about the way the Germans treated him in Africa. Of course, at this time, the Germans were fleeing towards the coast. Americans were after him. American and British were after him pretty hard, but there's some big battles going on. But the Germans would put them in the front lines, and then they told them, if you didn't fight and stay in the front lines, they'd shoot them from the back, and they really did that. So they killed a lot of their Italian people, because the Italians were not good fighters. They had very poor equipment, and of course they didn't get any. They were out of gas, they were out of food, and the Germans wouldn't give them any, so they were just sacrificed. And the general told us for coffee in the morning they used sawdust grounds that were partially burnt, and that was their coffee. They'd soak it in a couple, and it wasn't anywhere near coffee, but that was all they had to drink. And he looked pretty haggard. He'd been through some trying times, and of course he lost a tremendous amount of men. And the Italians, they were surrendering by the thousands that were in front. And the ones that stayed back there, the Germans shot them in the back. So
we got you from Drakkar to Marrakesh to the Italian general,
yeah.
And then you went to Algiers, correct?
From there we went to Algiers. They had right offhand, I don't remember the name of the airport, that we were designated. There was a central area where all the people, I can't remember the compound, that everybody went to, and then they sent them off to their groups that they were assigned to. And we were assigned to 414th, which was out of Algiers a ways, to get converted into British Air-type planes. And once we were converted in British planes, then we were assigned to our individual squadrons. So they broke our group up. I think there was about 13 or 14 with our ROs, which made about 26 people. And I went to 415th with a couple of other guys, I think about 4 of them. And the others went to stayed in 414th, and a couple went to 416th. I think 1 or 2 went to 417th. Not very many went to 417th.
Algiers, and you were there for a while. You were stationed in a few sorties out of Algiers for a while, and then the invasion into Sicily came. And the first place that you were stationed in Sicily, just to get an idea of where we went, and then we'll come back and cover some other details. Where did you land in Sicily? Where were you first stationed there?
Near Syracuse.
Okay.
Right on the coast, right on the water. And it had been a German airfield, and they were always scratched out of dirt, but there was a lot of rocks on it, so there was a good base. And there we found a lot of Italian small arms discarded. It was we'd see piles of them there. And of course, they told us not to go there because they might be booby tracked and stuff. And every now and then a guy would pick one up and look at it. They almost resembled some of our baby guns that were so tinny. And I can see why the Italians would discard them, because they weren't very good guns. Their equipment was terrible.
As the British moved up the east coast there in Sicily, you guys were flying apparently behind them.
Yeah, every time they'd move up far enough to be ahead of us, we'd fly. The next place we went to was the city of Catania, and we had nice quarters there. We took over sort of a hotel deal there. where that picture of me with me sitting on the cot
Oh, yeah.
was taken, and we were getting ready to move again, but we hated to leave that 'cause it was
Pretty relaxing.
relaxing. But when we landed in Syracuse, there was almond trees all over there. We were amongst the almond trees, but we contacted dysentery. We were intense. The whole squadron had dysentery, so we had a terrible time getting guys to fly. Before that, we were doing, when we were back in Algiers, we did a lot of convoy duty, patrolling convoys. And then at night, the Germans were still bombing Algiers, so we did a lot of chases there with Algiers. We got a couple of planes there, 2 or 3 planes that the guys got. I didn't happen to get any. I was on a lot of patrols. You'd be out there for hours at a time watching boats, convoys.
Was Catania the last place you were stationed in Sicily, or did you move up towards Messina, or towards Etna there, or did you go?
Well,
straight to
Catania was right, Etna was right by Catania.
Okay.
And when we were there, it erupted.
Yeah.
Very bad eruption. And the people were fleeing down the mountains because these people lived right up near the top of it. And Etna was known to pop off every so often. And it was real bad. But it was quite a sight to see. We'd fly up there, and by the time we got to 10, 12,000 feet, we were near the top of it, and you could see that cauldron glowing in there, and all the rivers of red lava flowing down, and it must have been terrible for them. A lot of people died because they couldn't escape it fast enough. These natives, they were on every inch of ground over there.
So the first mainland invasion came shortly after Sicily was taken, and they brought it up to, they landed at Sorrento, right?
Salerno.
And then you were based up there, just first base that you were at up there?
We landed in Salerno shortly after the Army established a beachhead there in Salerno, and the Germans were on the hill. It was just surrounding Salerno. It was a beach area, low, very fertile ground. And the Army almost got thrown back into the sea. My buddy Frank made us, when I saw him later on, he was through that battle on the ground. And he said if it wasn't for the Navy guns, that they called in the Navy ships, the big Navy destroyers, and especially the battleships. And if it wasn't for them, they'd have been thrown back in the sea. The whole thing would have been a failure. But when we landed there, our first echelon that landed there, the airfield, it was a German airfield before, and it was changing hands as the Americans would take it, and then the Germans would drive them back towards the shore, and then the Americans would take it, the Germans would drive them back towards the shore. And in one of these times, our echelon moved up because we were supposed to be with the fighter planes. We always moved with the fighter planes. And the crew chiefs, we always send the guys over on the boats, be on the ground, maintain our planes. And they saw this German plane coming in, a twin-engine plane. It landed there, and then the German crew realized it was taken by the Americans there, and they were going to turn around and take off. But our mechanics stuff put the Jeep in the runway, pulled out their revolvers and captured them. And it was one of their very newest 410. It was the newest version of the 210. 410. Messerschmitt.
Those German planes.
Yeah, yeah. And before our main body got there, they had that plane stripped and sent back to Washington compare it with our fight. They wanted to get the newest versions of what the Germans are doing with their fighter planes, because they had some good ones. Anyway, that was a story. So there was a couple Germans captured there.
So, did you start in Salerno as a base, or did you move? Your first place? Were you at Pomigliano?
No, Salerno. We stayed there. By the way, when we landed there, then the weather turned bad. We got rain, and oh, it was terrible flying. The mud would come. That's that fertile soil. It came right up through the mats. Our mud was that high on our tires. We had an awful time taking off. Sometimes you couldn't get the gear to come down because the whole thing was full of mud. And we lost some planes there, and it was terrible flying out of there. So we were really glad to get out of there and move up to, we moved from there to Pomigliano, which was a known air base. The Germans had that before. It was a cement runways, real nice runways. But it had been bombed quite a bit by both our sides, and then when we captured it, the Germans bombed it. So it had a lot of bomb craters on it, but they'd fill it up right away. And it was really a nice air base to fly out of. We stayed there quite a while.
Pomigliano for quite a while, then you moved up a bit to...
Next we went to, I think we went to Caserta and then Casino. Yeah.
Okay.
Casino. And there's two moves quite rapidly, but then we got to Casino, we were stuck because the army was stuck in the mountains, and we stayed there for a long time, flew out of there. And that's where I told you about Marshal Badoglio landed to surrender the Italian troops to the Americans there, and I'm not sure whether it was at Caserta that they went or what. I wouldn't swear to that because I can't remember that, but I always thought it was the castle of Caserta that they did the surrendering at, but Badoglio was nice enough to stand by and we'd take pictures with him, and so it was something was quite exciting.
Amazing.
Tell about his plane that came.
By the way, when they were taxiing around,
Yeah.
their pilots, they had a kind of a frivolous tri-motor plane. Italians didn't have very good equipment, and the guy pilot taxied into the edge of a tree and wrecked the tip of the wing, so they couldn't take it off till our crew fixed it for them. So they were stuck there for about 3 days. They got it patched up, and then they took off, went away.
Okay, so we got you to Casino, and then you moved up a little bit towards the coast, closer to Rome. And
Yeah, I want to tell you about the bombing of the Monte,
the Mount Casino.
Mount Casino, Abbey at Mount Casino.
Okay.
We were based in very near to it. We're probably, I think we were even closer to the base of the mountain than that, from here to Capri. And you could see that abbey up there. It was off bounds. The Americans finally decided that they were going to bomb it. And so we watched the first wave that hit them. They told us when they were going to be bombing it because they were decided to bomb it. They were going to give it everything they had because the Germans were using that actually, especially for visibility and also for big guns. They denied doing it, but they caught them using it. And we started bombing. The first wave was either B-26s or B-25s, the medium bombers. Then the heavy bombers came over, and they just plastered that thing for 2 or 3 days. On the very first day, the Germans had the Akax going pretty heavy, and a B-26 got hit real bad. It was amazing flying feat, and our base was right at the base of the mountain. And this, the pilot was killed right in the plane, and the co-pilot, the big hole was torn in the plane, and the plane was a physical wreck. And when they landed, he landed, crash landed on our field, and there's 2 or 3 of the crew that were killed. They were just blown to bits. And this co-pilot was injured. He had just only about one arm, but he did a masterful job of landing that. And they drugged the other 3 or 4 guys off that were on the crew that took them to the hospital because the ones weren't hurt, but they were shaken up, so they were just, it was a terrible scene. And that was our initiation to the bombing groups, because we normally didn't see bombers at all. You know, they'd go back to their bases. This time they were using our field for emergency, and that, I always admired that co-pilot saving the rest of the crew. That was outstanding.
A lot of blood spilled at that casino because there were waves trying to take it from the ground before they really bombed it, because they were trying to save the Abbey.
Oh, yes.
And but the proof was that the Germans were there was that they couldn't take the hill.
Yeah.
And multi-nationality were going in there, the Australians, I think they had some Indians and British, Americans.
Japanese.
We all tried taking it, but finally they decided to take the Abbey out, and then later they rebuilt it. Is that right?
Americans rebuilt it completely. I don't know what kind of a job they did, but I assume it was back to just the same position it was. They promised them they would do it. The funny part of it was the Germans claimed they weren't using it, but after it was bombed, completely bombed. It was obliterated. I still can't say it. But anyway, it was completely smashed. And in the meantime, the Germans fled it from there. But when the Americans came up to take it, the Germans were back there up again, and they just slaughtered our troops. They had to kind of circumvent it to take it eventually. And I'm not sure, but it runs in my mind that Senator Inouye from Hawaii was wounded in that, and also Dole was wounded in that area. They both were in those. It was in that press in that mountain area. Whether it was in that particular conflict or not, but it was in that area someplace. They were both severely wounded.
The casino was finally taken. You were based there for quite a while, like you said. And then you moved again up towards the coast.
Well, then the army just couldn't move. The Germans had them pinned down in the mission.
It was winter time too, right?
And the weather was bad. Then they planned a invasion, and it was in Anzio. When they landed in Anzio, they caught the Germans by surprise, because the Germans were all up by the army. They had all their armies up